I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Steve, I haven't seen you in forever.
Yeah.
It's great for you to be back on the show and talking to you again. I wanted to talk a little bit about well-known people who are sober. I'm purposely not saying people we know are in AA, because that's a 11th tradition thing, but people who are sober. And this is brought up because I saw that when Tim Walz was picked as Kamala Harris's VP pick, that he had a DUI back in 1995, and it was his impetus to stop drinking. Now, I don't know what he's doing. I have some suspicions based on when he stopped and the fact that he hasn't drunk again. If we look at the last few presidents, George W. Bush stopped drinking at 40. It sounds like he had a pretty big problem. Trump and Biden also don't drink and really never have, but for different reasons, that both of them have a family history. And they saw that with the family history, there was a problem that they could get into, so they chose not to. And with both of them, they had family members who had bad addiction issues. Joe Biden with his son Hunter, Donald Trump with his brother Fred. That ruined both of their lives, so I think it was wise. I'm just looking on social media now, and there's one of these meme-type things of John Goodman talking about why he stopped drinking. And this little meme says, "It frightens me, and I know I can only speak for one day at a time, but I know I'm not going to drink today, and I've gained so much by giving it up, I regained my life." So my thought here is, what inspiration does it give people to know that there are well-known people out there who are sober? Does it give you any hope? Does it make you feel better? Does it do nothing? Is it harmful about talking about people who are well-known and their sobriety? I got a lot of thoughts on this one.
Yeah, when you threw this out yesterday or this morning, whenever you threw it out to me, I was like, at first I wasn't sure. But thinking about it, I do know that when I see somebody, especially when somebody's revealed to me, usually by themselves, right? They're out and they talk about it. And there's a whole bunch of people out there. When it's revealed to me that these people are out there, it does give me some, I'm not sure what the right word is, not relief, but it gives me a little bit more understanding of this disease, right? Dax Shepard, one of my, podcast guys, well-known, talks about his stuff all the time, right? I'm not outing him. He talks about it openly on his podcast all the time. And he struggled a little bit. And, when I hear these stories, it's relatable to me on a human level, right? But yet, the other person that came to mind who's had some struggles, and I just saw something about the other day. I don't know when it was recorded, but Ben Affleck, right? Another guy who's had lots of trouble. And when I see these guys and when I see them struggle, I just realize how difficult this disease is.
Absolutely.
Right? I do. I look at it, and some of these people, they have everything you could want. They have all the money in the world. You take Ben Affleck for, again, who's publicly has gone out and talked about his own disease. He had everything. Beautiful family, beautiful wife, successful, beautiful kids. And it just reminds me that it doesn't matter. So for me, when I do see that, when I see people have made good strides in sobriety, again, whatever way they want to do it, it does give me a little bit of juice, right? Oh yeah. Not only first of all, this person had this problem. He struggled with it, even though he had all those resources. And I struggle with it without those resources. But it just shows you, to me, the difficulty of this disease. So it's a little bit double-sided to me. One is, like I said, it shows me how tough this disease is, and two, it does give me a little bit of a boost. Like, wow, look at this community I'm part of. Right? That's what I look at it. And again, some of the people that you mentioned differently, like Trump. Well, never was a drinker, as far as I know. Right? Like he just wasn't. I don't know the Biden story.
I don't think he's ever had alcohol.
Right. Okay. So I don't know what that is, but certainly other people, anybody who's grew up my age, remember Jimmy Carter and then his brother Billy, who was
and Billy Bear.
Billy Bear, right? Billy Carter. So it's been out there, and lots of famous people out there who are. And a lot of them are trying to. Yeah, they reach out, and they publicly put it out there so that they can help people.
Yes,
right. They can.
Al Franken has been very open in that he's a member of Al-Anon.
Okay. Not the other
not
one,
a drinker,
right?
but he's talked about. I am surrounded by people.
Right.
That I need relief from codependency.
Another great thing I mentioned out. We were watching. I was watching a show with my wife, and they were talking about somebody mentioned codependent, and they were talking about getting some help, or I can teach you something about that. And I sort of just made a comment while we were watching the show. Al-Anon could help you with that too, because it can. But anyway, so there's a lot to it. I think there is a lot. So give me your thoughts. I mean, this is something you've been thinking about. Tell me what you're thinking about with this whole subject.
These people fascinate me. I can't even tell you why, but I do get comfort in it when I see people like I have a friend, Darren, who will send me clips of people talking about their sobriety, famous people. Mm-hmm. So he chooses not to drink. He's had alcohol before, and he's chosen now that, it doesn't work for me.
Right.
But he identifies as somebody who doesn't drink, not as somebody who's a problem drinker.
Right.
And he'll send me stuff, and he's like, this is great stuff. And he's fascinated by famous people who tell these stories, as am I. When I've seen Anthony Hopkins talk about 40 plus years of sobriety, it's a great thing to see. And it's inspiring to see somebody who could be at the lowest of a DUI and rise to congressman, governor of Minnesota, being nominated for vice president, of what you can do getting sober. On the other hand, the first person that comes to mind who has failed at this is this comedian Artie Lang. I have no idea if you know who Artie Lang is.
I do.
Okay. So Artie, top of the world on Howard Stern. This guy was playing at Carnegie Hall and totally threw it all away over heroin and alcohol. And he may be sober now, but it doesn't seem like this guy has ever really been able to put together much sobriety. And it's ironic that all of his friends are all dead. Norm Macdonald, who's another person who died sober, he's gone. Bob Saget, Gilbert Gottfried, this group of comedians, not necessarily, I know that Norm was sober, didn't drink, but Artie's still alive, but with all of his resources, he couldn't kick this thing. If anybody, I look at somebody, and I'm sure there are people even more famous with more money, and their names they're just escaping me right now. You can have the world by the balls, and that's still not enough to get sober. Or you can be the guy that you see at a meeting who doesn't own a car and barely might have a roof over his head, and he's got 15 years of sobriety.
Absolutely.
So this disease doesn't discriminate, nor does it give you an advantage because you have resources to help. If you have the resources, it's really helpful, but you also have to have that desire.
Right. It can be helpful. One of the things you said, and I just wish I wonder if you can expand on it, because I'm not sure I understand it. You said that when you hear these people, it comforts you. What do you mean by it comforts you? Like,
it's a hard thing to see somebody like John Goodman. So Goodman is top of mind because Goodman also had food issues too. Like he's lost a ton of weight. But somebody like John Goodman, if I look at somebody who's an actor or somebody well known, it feels like those people are in a different universe than me. Yet I know that Goodman goes to meetings. He has to do the same things I have to do.
Right.
And does the same things I do. And I look at somebody like a John Goodman who must have less time on his hands than I do. It's when you're a working actor, those hours are rough. They could be very long days, very long nights, and you have to carve out that time for you. And he's been successful in doing that. And yet, if he were just to show up at one of our meetings, he would just be another alcoholic.
Right.
There'd be no class differentiation. I'm sure there are meetings that are celebrity dominated, but a meeting's a meeting.
Yeah, I agree. I may have mentioned it. It seems to me like I might have mentioned this before, but who knows when. But when I first got sober, I was going to my Friday night men's meeting, and there was a young guy there who I didn't stay in that meeting that long, but that I didn't stay in the program that long. But this one guy was there, and I liked him. He was a young guy, and he had really good sobriety. He didn't have a lot. We probably had about the same amount of years at that time, or same amount of time when I first came in. But he was really working the program hard. And anyway, he moved to California, and every once in a while he'd come back and visit, and he would visit family, and he would come to that Friday night meeting. And it was always nice to see him. And he came back, and he told a horrific story how he had relapsed, which I won't get into. But he talked about being out in California where he was. He must, and he would said, like, I sit in meetings all the time with people that you would know. That's what he would say, right? Because he was in the LA area, and that's what he said. Like, I sit in meetings all the time with people that you would know. So I do think that for many, it's just a meeting. It's just a meeting. And you're absolutely right that these people, many of them, not all of them, many of them, they have to do the exact same things that we have to do. They have to, again, now, for our way of recovery, if they're doing an AA program, they're going to need a sponsor. They're going to need, they're going to need a group. They're going to need to attend meetings. They're going to need to do the steps. Like all of those same things that we went through, many of those people have gone through.
Right.
And again, it's not the only way, and a lot of these people have found other ways to do it. And I also think that some of the people, like your Ben Afflecks, who have taught, he's struggled on and off and on and off, and you could just see his whole life. You could see this guy's life. Like I look at his life and I go, yeah, that's an alcoholic life.
Yep.
That's an alcoholic life. No matter what kind of money you have, right? Just the struggles that he just keeps, the positions he puts himself in. And a lot of it I don't understand, right? I mean, he has a different thing. His whole thing in life is about visibility and name recognition and being out there in the public's eye. So some of the stuff that he does maybe is for that reason. But I look at the addiction and I go, I mean this. I could sit in a meeting with Ben Affleck and not be starstruck. I mean it. I could sit in a meeting with somebody and not be starstruck because I realize this disease doesn't discriminate. And it'd be nice to see him, and I might say, hey, great to see you, whatever, come back and say hello. But in those meetings, they would just be another drunk on the bus. That's it.
Yeah. And the beauty is because of anonymity, we couldn't tell you.
We could not tell you.
Tom Cruise could have walked into our Monday night meeand we can't tell you.
I'll tell you something. It's pretty interesting that you say that, is that I went to a meeting here, and it was in Connecticut. It's here. And I went up to this meeting. I went up with a friend, and there was a guy there who I knew from somewhere, right? It was one of those things like, I know this guy from somewhere. He was talking, and they mentioned, like, I know this guy. And they said his first name, and I'm like, and I start driving home. I was coming home with my buddy Chuck, and I figured it out. I'm like, Chuck, isn't that so-and-so? And he's like, listen, I can't tell you who that is, right? But I went home and I Googled it, and sure enough, it was the guy who I thought it was, right?
Yep.
Who's a famous artist, musician, who I grew up with. And I was like, but in that meeting, he was just who he was.
Yes.
Like, there was nothing else. And it was a small meeting. That meeting was probably 6 or 8 of us. Like, he was just one of 6 or 8 people. He was just another alcoholic.
He was looking for relief.
And that's the whole point, right? If I don't know who he is just another alcoholic, right? So, and then it's, Connecticut has enough. We don't have a lot of famous people, but we have writers and stuff. And there's a couple writers, big time writers, who, if you go to meetings up in certain areas, you'll run into them. And they're well known, especially in the area. But they're also, well-known writers around the country and around the world. Actually.
There's some well-known people who kind of hang around our parts in Connecticut, too.
There are.
Connecticut is what Connecticut. It's close enough to New York. It's close to an airport. There are certain parts like Litchfield County.
Absolutely.
Washington, Connecticut, especially.
Yeah,
I think that's where Conan was living for a while.
Yeah. No, there's that whole area, Fairfield area, right down by New York.
I don't consider Fairfield part of Connecticut.
Down by that area. Yeah, and there are. So there are plenty of people. So like I said, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it's like it gives me I don't know what it is. I don't want to say hope. It gives me some understanding that my disease is just a really tough fucking disease. I mean that honestly. Like that's the thing it gives me most. Like, oh man, this is a tough disease. And I think what that does for me, that I'm having trouble getting out there, is I think it gives me some confidence that I'm doing okay. Right? I mean that. Like, oh, wait a minute. Sometimes I struggle in this program, and I struggle in aspects of my life. And I realized, other people do too with this disease, right? It's the other thing. Like, I used to play a lot of golf. I don't play as much anymore. Since I started doing my hiking and stuff, hurt my shoulder. I haven't played golf regularly in a while. But I love watching golf, and I love watching when they shank their shots. And they do really crappy shots. I always said, I could do that shot, right? Oh, I could hook it into the woods, And it makes me, when I see that happen, these guys are the best of the best. Every once in a while, they just look so crappy. And I think that's what I look at when I see people in this program. Like, oh, look at this person. Just like we said, has all these resources, all this stuff. It just shows me like, yeah, this isn't easy. So give yourself some credit, right? Give me some credit for doing the work I need to do to stay sober and live a better life.
This then comes down to the meaning of life. And I am very guilty of this, of comparing and saying, I'm not doing enough. I've got too much credit card debt. I've got things in the house that I can't pay for. I just put in, I budgeted for it. I had it from savings, but I had to put $2,000 into my car this week. Nothing was abnormal. 4 new tires. I needed new tires.
Right.
They needed to be aligned. Oil change,
right.
Transmission fluid. There was something wrong with the exhaust system, and it just was a bunch of little things, and they needed to get fixed. And I wasn't thrilled about dropping $2,000. I would have liked to use that for other things. So I look at that, and it's very easy for me to beat myself up and say, I'm a failure. On the other hand, what are the things that are really important? That I had a drinking problem, and I haven't had a drink for 10 years. Mm-hmm. That is more than a lot of people who have more than I have, theoretically, monetarily, but they don't have more than what I have spiritually, or whatever. They have things lacking in their life, and they have an addiction problem. I use this kind of example. When we were at the outlets today, there's this stoplight going on to 495 out in Eastern Mass. And the light is not long. It's confusing. And there's a lot of traffic in this area. And this guy in a Porsche came flying by everybody, cut everybody off, and got on the highway. And it was some dude, some bald-headed dude, looked like he was a little on the older side. So it was a Porsche convertible. And my son said, like typical. He's an asshole. Of course he's he's an asshole. He drives a Porsche.
Right.
And I said, you've got that wrong. He's an asshole. He probably feels my time is more important than your time. And he just so happens to be that guy who also can afford a Porsche. The Porsche is like this, is just another thing. But I used to have these people who call into the call center like, I used to be a lawyer and I sued people like, throwing around their weight. There's a sense of, somebody like that has a sense of insecurity if they have to do that.
Right.
And then he's like parked in like the middle of a highway at some point. I thought he broke down. I'm like, this guy's going to get killed. Something is wrong here. But it made me think that, okay, he's got that Porsche and, he can drive by without getting caught with the cops. But if he does this enough times, he's going to get totaled.
Right.
He's going to get killed. And if you're that miserable and you think of yourself better than other people, there's an underlying insecurity. There's an underlying unhappiness there. People who, and that's my desire is, can I connect better with everyone and bring a smile to their face? Or can I just be a troll on the type of people are trolls on Twitter or trolls in the political world who just sow discord or a cheap laugh? I want to be the other.
Yeah, I mean that is the goal, right? Is to be the other. It's what I work on, not being the asshole that I was for a long time. And I do a fairly good job of that, especially in the outer world when I'm out there facing the real world. I do a pretty good job with it. Still struggle in my more intimate relationships with that at times, but for the most part. And again, with the whole thing, it's progress, not perfection. But you said something about comparing, and I've had a couple tough couple months. No big deals. There's nothing big going on, but just emotional struggles, and I can't put my finger on it exactly. I know there's some things going on, but I can't exactly. And today was one of those days. It's like I was off today. Like I was just feeling uncomfortable. I was feeling irritable. And I'm thinking, and this is the beauty of the program we work. I'm thinking there's no reason for me to be feeling this way. Right. There's and like I could say, like there's nothing happening now. Again, I could start pointing out there is something happening, and I'll touch on those a little bit. But there's really nothing happening to make me feel that irritable and discontented. Now, having said that, I will tell you, I'm a big Olympics guy. So Olympics have been on the last couple of weeks, and I just started binging. My wife and I are watching a show, and I just started binging Game of Thrones. I've never seen it before.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I am. But this is the problem right now. So what's happening is for the past 2 weeks, I may have spent 6 hours a day in front of the TV. That's unheard of for me, right?
Yeah.
That's unheard of for me. And that could be part of my problem. Like I'm just spending too much time. And I am. I mean, I actually am. I'm loving Game of Thrones. I started watching it when it first came out. And when they chopped off Ned Stark's head, I'm like, what the heck? He's a star of the show. You just chopped off his head.
Yeah.
And now I realize they just kill everybody in that show.
Like Sopranos.
No matter who you write, no matter who you are.
Very Sopranos-like.
But anyway, so I do realize, that's happening. I'm not exercising, and I haven't been eating as healthy. So, like I said, there are some things going on. And I just got over COVID, and there's been there's some shit going on, right? So, but I don't. That still doesn't give me a reason to feel like I felt today. Put it that way, right? I was irritable. I could tell, I was irritable. I wanted to bark at my wife. I didn't. That was a nice thing. I didn't. I'm like, I felt like I could feel myself, like I wanted to lash out. And I was standing there, right? So one of the things that happened at my Friday night meeting, and you talked about, you look at you could be doing more, is I think about my program, and you mentioned this a lot. We always think we could be doing more in our program. And one of the guys who's about the same age, a little bit younger than me, was talking, I got got 3 new sponsees, and it's great. I'm taking them through the steps. It's been a while since I had a sponsee, right? And I think, man, that's one of the things. Like, I could use a sponsee. Like, I could use somebody to be focused on their shit instead of my shit. I'm not one to go out and hunt for sponsees, so that's not going to happen. If somebody wants my help, I'll be glad to help them, but I don't go out there looking for sponsees. But I do realize that. So it's been a while since I've worked with somebody. It's been a while since I've really been in the steps and doing some of the stuff. We used to do the Joe and Charlie, right?
Yep.
We didn't do it last year. You know, I was thinking we didn't do it for 2 years. Sue said we did it the year before.
No, we did. This was we didn't do it this year. We didn't do it in 2024. Right. We did it in 2023.
Okay, yeah. She said, I said, I don't remember. She's like, trust me, I remember. I'm like, okay. But so like some of that stuff, and that was getting old and stale, and I get it. I don't mind that stopped, but some of that stuff kept me in the groove. You know what I mean? And that went away. You know. I called our buddy John today. He used to do this podcast, right? I haven't done a lot of hiking. I had in good shape this year to do a lot of hiking, so I haven't done. So John and I don't see each other much anymore. He used to be on this podcast with us. We used to do a lot of hiking. I finally called him today. I'm like, hey, man, I don't talk to you anymore. You know, I don't see him. You know, he doesn't come to our Monday night meeting anymore, stuff like that. So, you know, I have to be careful with what I'm comparing myself to. Like I said, I work a pretty good program, because I guess this is my point. If I compare myself to that guy who has 3 new sponsees, I could make myself feel like shit. Right? I'm not working hard enough. I'm not doing. What am I doing wrong? Why doesn't anybody want to? You know, that kind of stuff. So I got to be careful with that kind of stuff. And then it comes back to our topic. When I see famous people with this same problem or in this doing the same thing, I realize, yeah, it's tough work. And for me, again, different for different people, but for me, it's a lifetime of work, right? That's what it is for me. I still think today, like, I don't know, again, I've been in this funk. Friday came along. I love my Friday night meeting. And I'm like, this is how I felt, Matt. I think I hate all of these guys at that meeting. Right? Like,
those guys?
Yeah. I don't like this guy. I don't like that guy. This guy pissed me off. Like, and trust me, I catch myself like, what are you talking about, man? I love these guys, right? But I just was in this funk. So the beautiful thing is that I can notice that, hopefully. I did this week. I did today. Which, again, brings me back to, it's a tough damn disease. It's tough for me to work this. And I need to work it all the time. All the time.
I look at this disease as alcoholism, I think, is a symptom of a bigger mental health disorder.
Me too.
And you have to treat the underlying thing. And a 12-step group can do a lot to help that, because it helps you get at those underlying causes, but not everything. So, yeah, I have had those feelings as well. I will tell you one thing that has gone better is I realized going to the outlets today, driving an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back. One of the things that was different for me is I wasn't as tired. I had more energy to do it because I'm sleeping now. It took months, but I'm realizing I do feel a little bit better. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm better than where I was. Yep. So taking care of sleep apnea has made a difference. Plus, I've lost some weight, although I've stalled, and I'm very frustrated over hitting a plateau. After 30 pounds, I hit a plateau.
It happens, man.
I need to get past that.
Right.
So we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you scroll through on social media and you like those posts of people that are well-known who have had success with sobriety? Does it give you inspiration? Is it not worth talking about because you're one of those people who's like 11th tradition, we can't talk about this? I'm not one of those people. But I'd love to hear from you. Email matt@soberfriendspod.com, Instagram @soberfriendspod. Steve, thanks for making it another great podcast.
Thanks, Matt.
We'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody.
you made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.